Guys, can you hear me? Yes? Okay. I got my new fancy schmancy microphone set up here. Use it for audio recording now, but it also works perfectly apparently on these Zoom calls, called an iRig, which is basically a preamp for high quality audio. So that's it's made a big difference in just recording on the iPad what I do and my music, just to play around with some ideas there. So hopefully I sound clearer than normal. I don't know if that makes any difference on this or not. And I didn't know who would be on tonight, because it's kind of one of those of a double, this month. So I'm glad to see you guys. Oh, I see Doug on here and Paul. Gosh, there's all sorts of guys on here. Tracy, you're on here too. Outstanding. So how's the weather up in Nova Scotia, or wherever the heck you are, Tracy? Are you on here? Yeah, maybe not. Okay, guys. Wait just a minute only, just to have some other people come on. I see Sharon and Blake both came on, so I'm not going to have any presentation materials this time. This is just a talk about the certain idea that I talk about in classes, but we don't go into a lot of depth. I just use it as examples at times. So we'll see. So there's Tracy. Oh, I see you. Hello. How's the weather up there?
We are currently in another storm here in Nova Scotia.
No. Okay.
I need to
apologize.
Let me do
I'm gonna have to reset my settings here. So pardon me a moment. I can't hear anybody.
Men ready their rewires. We're gonna get together right now. In our kitchen.
Okay, let's try this again. Somebody talk.
Hello.
Can I hear anyone?
No, I don't think
I hear no one. Okay, well, it's for some reason it's defaulting to huh. Oh, all right. I know how I can change that. Maybe.
Come here, bud. Come here, big mouth.
Okay, let's try this again. Somebody say something, please.
Something, please.
Yay! All right, outstanding. We have a touchdown. All right. You know, technology. Can't live with it, can't live without it.
If it makes you feel any better, my webcam that's never had any issues is suddenly not working tonight.
No, that doesn't make me feel any better. Uh, well, it's good to see all you guys on here. Kind of surprised at the number because I figured this being the one before the normal one, since I wasn't able to. I apologize for last month. Obviously, um, you know, death in the family caught us by surprise. It was not expected, and so it just caused a month of uh, you know, disconcerting things. So apologize I wasn't able to do it last month, so I had to make it up, and because you guys deserve one a month plus the Q&A at least. Okay, so we've got a number of people on here. It looks like maybe 20 or so besides myself, and a number of people contacted me and said they wouldn't be on live this particular time, so they will catch the recordings. I do hope that people are going back on the recordings and uh, listening, for those who are even here, or that certainly that are not able to catch the original. Shoot, if Rachel can make it at 2 a.m. on her time, anybody else should be able to.
Well, this time it's 1 p.m., 1 a.m. So
Okay. Well, by the time we get finished, it'll be 2:30
yeah,
or
that's
something.
true.
So,
Next week is going to be harder than this week.
okay. Well, you can catch the recording.
I could.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, I have a few questions for you guys at the end of this. So I'm going to go ahead with the presentation, the talk itself, and just go through my outline. You know, this will be it's never short. My outline's much shorter. I'm giving myself free rein to go down many deep holes if I need to. Um, so let's talk about contrast assists with clarity, or another way I put it is contrast is clarity, but that's only if you're communicating in a judicious manner, in one that makes sense to the dog or the client. Because this isn't just about dogs. Sometimes you use contrast um, to point things out uh, to your client as well. And matter of fact, Tracy, you remember a contrast conversation we had in course 2, don't you? About
Oh, Nelson, I remember so many things about course 2.
about frustration and composure.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I do.
So, you know, that those moments, you need to take advantage of those moments when you can contrast things for your clients, because it gets them out of their head, and it makes them think about things from a different perspective. And that's really what you're trying to do. If you're just corroborating what they already know, you're not helping your clients, because they're the ones that need your help in the first place. So you must contrast with what they already think and know. Otherwise, you're really not doing a very good job at communicating different ideas than what they have. Even in a quote unquote a brush up session, you should have contrasts and be able to point those things out for them. So this, once again, what's that, Rachel? I didn't see. I'm sorry.
It's my Canada cup that I brought back home several years ago. It's actually from Ottawa, so
There
I
you go.
pointed it out to Tracy and Sharon. Sharon is also from that area. So
Yes.
hello,
yeah.
Canadian friends.
And Chloe.
Oh, Chloe. Okay.
Yeah. And Brianna. That's right.
Oh, Brianna too. Oh, wow. I
Yeah,
don't
we
know
got a-
you in person,
We
so
got
but
we got a bunch of Canucks here.
good, good.
No, Maple Leafs, not Connects.
Oh, okay. Sorry. The knuckleheads. Canigats. So, okay. So, what is contrast? So, contrast is a lot of things. Let's talk about some major elements. Okay. And the first one is contrast. We can use it in opposition. Okay. So, opposition is certainly a contrast. And the way you use it, well, it's not if that's your behavior, normal behavior, and in conflict. We're not trying to be in conflict. So if your normal behavior is to argue against or oppose, then that's not a contrast. What would be a contrast in your behavior would be to be agreeable and totally composed. That would be a contrast. So it's not being in opposition, it's when the opposition is required to give an entirely different response than that person or that dog has ever gotten before. That is powerful message that, and where I mostly use it because humans are, we're idiot primates. So we monkey each other a lot. We do things according to the way humans do things, and dogs don't understand a lot of those things a lot of the time, honestly. So the contrast in opposition is a diametrically opposed expectation. Okay. So contrast in opposition, we can use that. For instance, a dog that wants to come up and kill me, and I stand there calmly and smile and stare at it, or I ignore it, depending on what's necessary in that moment. That dog is not getting what it normally gets as a response from a human. So what do you think it does? It has to stop and think, which is exactly what I want it to do. I don't want it to be in that lower survival brain of, the cerebellum and the, hypothalamus and all the thalami and all of that area of the brain, which is just the instinctual primal, response area. I want it to suddenly have to think and look for neural pathways that make sense of my behavior, which is totally opposite what they would expect. Now, we can use that in a number of ways. We don't have to use it against, quote unquote, an aggressive dog. So let's talk about some of these areas. So in what areas can you and should you use diametrically opposed behaviors? Actions, directions, communications, even examples. And I'm talking about examples for humans, your client, other trainers that you're trying to help, or examples for your dogs too, because dogs understand examples given, whether they're. We'll get into that. Okay, hang on a second. Cough. That's enough. Okay, so somebody delivered something to the front door, I guess. Coffee's our alarm. She's good at it. So in a lot of cases, a lot of areas, in a lot of cases, you want to give an opposite response because it gets the attention of the dog. They didn't expect it. And it's not to create conflict, it's to do the exact opposite. It is to make sure that that dog stops, pauses, and thinks about something rather than simply respond as expected. I'll give you a good example. I was driving, I went out to Blue Ridge today, which is about a 65-mile trip to me from home, where the center is over there, and worked a little bit. And then as I got back in, the neighbors at the end of our private road where we all have to pass have a dog that was seen for miles around for months. And this dog was pregnant, and she ended up having puppies, and somehow decided that our neighbor down there at the end of the road was a good place to just stop and raise her puppy because she only had one left. And so she became very territorially directed, I will say, on her own accord of that house and that property. So through my behaviors over a few months, I helped those people define where the edges of the property was that she should be concerned about. One of them was I found her coming past their property line, an area which there was a marker there of large roll bales of hay on the adjacent property, which is an empty property between me and them. And so we've got 1,000 feet between where my dogs and my property stay and are, and all the classes are, and where their property is, and they don't have a fence. So at one point, the dog became comfortable with, going after cars on the main road as well as inside there. And I would stop, slow down, roll down the window, stop, and talk to the dog, and she'd back off and walk off because it wasn't what she wanted or expected. She wanted that adrenaline and dopamine rush afterwards of chasing cars. And so she associated my calm, happy voice and seeing her and telling her she's a good dog when she stopped with my vehicle. And so every time from then on that she ever saw my vehicle, she didn't bother with it. And then she became less and less concerned about vehicles going by. Well, so the last course too we had, Shelley was in it, as a matter of fact. Right before class, I was preparing and I saw her coming up. I had Bosch with me at that point, and I saw Lucy. That's the dog's name that they gave her, and she's used to now. I saw her going past the bales of hay toward me, towards us, and I went, "Oh no, we're not going to have this." So I went toward her, and she barked. I had Bosch stay back, so I didn't have to deal with multiple dog situation. And he stayed on property, and I walked towards her. And as soon as she she was barking at me and backing off. And as soon as she got to her property, I stopped. I turned around. She kind of came back. I went back again and then stopped. So the contrast of me going, no, that's not what we're going to do. I wasn't yelling at her or anything else. I just went as a predator. Hey, that's not your territory, stay out. And then I helped her define where her territory edge was by doing that. And then the lady, our neighbors, came out, and I explained what I was doing to her, and I kept walking towards, and then Lucy was looking back and forth between us, and Linda came on out, and then her puppy came out with her. And so I invited her puppy to me at the edge of their property, and I greeted the puppy, and then she came up for the first time, and I greeted her, and she was fine. So we defined the edge there, and she's never been past that point again, and she leaves my car alone. So this time leaving today, coming back home here for this class, this talk, I saw Lucy got, I had a trailer, and so that trailer made more noise and a different noise, and it looked different than my normal vehicle. So she was at the front of their house. I couldn't see her, and she started running at it at the sound because it was different than my vehicle. So I stopped. I saw her, and she stopped. She kind of barked a little bit and stopped. And then I got out. I greeted her. I called her puppy to me, and puppy play bad, I play bad, and then she ran over to me and all of that. And then, Lucy came over and sniffed me, and I was playing with her. And then I got back in the vehicle and left, and they were fine. So contrasting what she expected in the car, the person in it, all of those things. First of all, the first time I did all of that with her was to show her that there are humans in those cars. It's not just a car running, it's not just some monster running by that you can chase off. So she started associating vehicles with humans, and now she understands what that is. So those are the types of clarity and contrast that you can give. It's an initial opposition that's meant to communicate for cooperation. Okay, so that's the oppositional aspect. So the value of opposite responses, it causes the dog and the client, by the way, if you're using an opposite response or an opposite saying or something like that, to have to pause and use the upper brain to think, right? Rather than just react. Because if they just react, and you give them an opposite response, they have nowhere to go with that reaction. You're not giving them anywhere to go. Okay. And then their expected reaction doesn't make any sense to your behavior because it's not what they normally get. So working with aggressive dogs, again, not responding, not reacting, not seeing them as a threat is not what they expect at all. We're reactive to when we think we are going to be hurt or attacked by a dog. And we respond mentally, physiologically, every which way. And if you can keep your composure, and this is one of the main reasons that I recommend for people to take a martial art or something that helps you understand how to use your body and how to be in conflict and not get and remain composed. Because you have situations that you practice over and over and over again in conflict and learn how to deal with it, frankly, mentally more than physically, frankly. So being able to stay composed, not have thoughts of fear, uncertainty, doubt, the FUD factor, and not having thoughts of anger or frustration or any of those other things. Because why? Because the chemicals in your brain that create those thoughts are specific chemicals, the neurotransmitters and hormones that create the soup that actually create the signal itself between neurons. So that soup in your brain, the dogs can smell it because they smell everything through you. Because it doesn't just stay in the brain, it goes throughout your body as well. So you're exuding fear, uncertainty, doubt, frustration, all of those things by smell, which is their universe. We use our eyes and we see everything. That's how we identify everything. They use their nose. That's how they identify everything. The more you can understand about that. And so you being composed is not faking it till you make it. You cannot lie to a dog. All you'll do is get distrust because it doesn't make sense to them that you smell a certain way and you're acting another way. That we talked about congruity before. And that congruence of relevance that you must have in yourself is how you best work with a dog. That's how you begin becoming trustworthy. Okay. So, so we want that upper brain to think, not the lower brain. We want them to think rather than just react. And that's that first thing when they pause and have to have a different response. I'll give you another example to that, especially on an aggressive dog. Amy Feltz, some of you people may know her. She's a very good trainer in Dallas that works with a lot of aggressive dogs. And to begin with, he didn't work with that many, but there was at one point a time, and I believe I've mentioned this before, maybe not in this series, where she slammed on the brakes because there was a homeless guy beating a pit bull female with a pipe, and she slammed on the brakes, made him stop. There was a male and a female dog, pit bulls there with him, and he was crying. He didn't know what else to do, he said. And she begged him to just give them to her. She would take care of them. And they had a long conversation, and he did give them up to her because he didn't know what else to do. So I'm sure there was some mental illness aspects or something that's all he knew, his frustration or whatever else, his situation. So she got them into her car and vehicle, I should say, and got them back to her house. And I can't remember if she texted me or phoned me, but I was out of town and couldn't get there for 2 days minimum. So I think she called Quinn Colat and a couple of other trainers to come help her because the male was fine, got out of the car. The female, it took them 7 hours to get her out of the car, which you would imagine getting beaten by a human with a pipe over the head and every place. She's probably not going to trust any humans again. So in contrast, and to make people think differently about that severely aggressive dog that distrusted humans, she named her Sunshine, which I thought was hilarious. And so Sunshine spent a month in her kennel housing in crates, where she would daily move her to a different crate not without handling her, and clean this crate up and everything else. So she spent a month just getting that dog to trust her at one point. So I did go over 2 days after she got her, and she opened the door up. It was a garage door into that area, and so she opened her up, and she was right there. Amy stood in her front yard and said, "There she is. Good luck." So I went over, and this is the one that, this is probably the longest term dog that barked deeply, heat, "I'm going to kill you" message at my back for the longest period I've ever had of any dog. Can't blame her. Even Barney was only 5 minutes. This girl was 20 minutes before she ever stopped that barking at my back, that I just sat down and just kind of calmly ignored her and looked around, and I was unaffected by her. And it took her 20 minutes to finally stop for a second to move to the back, which they do, and test it. So she feigned sniffing at a corner and then attacked the door again and hit it and, I'm going to kill you, get away from me type thing. And about 5 minutes later, she tried it again, a little more sniffing, came back, but this time the bark wasn't that deep, guttural utterance of, I'm going to kill you. It was a high pitched, I don't know what to do. And I smiled at that point. And Amy was still in her front yard just watching, going, I'm not going near. And, and, that only lasted about 30 seconds. And then she gave up and went to the back and curled up and laid down. And that's when I got up again on angle, not stand up. I would have started it all over again on angle away from her and just walked away. And she stayed there. The contrast was, I'm sighing, I'm bored, she's an inch from me at the gate, at the door of the crate, and she's not affecting me. I gave her the opposite response of what she always did, and she didn't know what to do with it after 25 minutes, and finally just laid down because I affected her. I didn't allow her to affect me. So that's a contrast, is clarity of, I don't see you as a threat. I'm unaffected by any of your stuff. I'm not going to respond to you. And that was her first change of mind in her life, probably. Just to allow her to sit, think, and she wore herself out and said, well, I guess he's not going away and I'm not affecting him and he's not doing anything, so I'll just lay down here at the back. So it was not helplessness in that case, or the popular thing about, learned helplessness, which is very, very rare, guys, very rare. I've got stories about that. I won't tell about them. Prisoners of war, basically, that I won't go into detail, but there's no such thing as learned helplessness unless you just give up and die. Literally. When you give up, you do die in those situations. When you can keep a piece of straw from the guards and the people who are torturing you and everything else, that one piece of straw keeps your sanity. So learned helplessness is when you die. That's it. And so I think there's a huge misunderstanding, especially in the dog world, about that. Like all these catchphrases that seem to garner a lot of backing for it to explain stuff that people don't understand, frankly. So have to understand things from a number of perspectives and a number of ways to really get it. Okay. So working with fearful dogs, an opposite response is not to do what humans normally do and try to cuddle up and stare at the dog and reel him in and all those other things. It's to join that dog and, yeah, I understand. Let's stay over here in this corner together and look out the way that dog does at those things. And those of you guys like Robin who've been to the fearful feral dog workshops out there, Doug, I think, Laura, you were there. You see that response within 10-15 minutes of this absolutely terrified, fearful feral animal kind of join in with you, even that first little bit of trust, that contrast of how humans normally behave towards them and you behave entirely different. So they have to stop and think, and you give them the time. If you rush anything with a dog that's in aggression or fear or any severe state, frankly, an OCD of any type, if you give in to your time frame and your want of when that dog should do X, you've just destroyed the trust. You've destroyed the ability to have contrast help you with clarity. Okay. But you give that dog whatever time it needs. period. And if you can't do that, or you're not ever willing to do that, don't work with those types of dogs. Seriously, you will do more damage. So nothing wrong with that. If you don't want to work with those types of dogs, don't. That's fine. Okay. But it certainly does stretch your ability to work with any type of dog, and ability to handle any situation when you encounter those things. Okay. Working with puppies. So giving an opposite response to a puppy is what adult dogs do with puppies. Puppy comes over, wants to play, and mother turns its head away, and the puppy calms down. If it doesn't, then she corrects it. Boom, hey, cut it out. Puts a paw on it, whatever else. In other words, the behaviors of puppies is what dogs do to you too, to excite you, to make you do, to create a behavior in you, to say, hey, join me. And if you don't allow that, if you get the opposite, if you give the opposite response, that's all it takes to quell that excitement, that behavior, all of those things. Any behavior that you disagree with, you don't have to directly oppose. You simply just don't join in with it, and it's not appropriate. You show the dog the contrast of it's not appropriate here or at this time. That's how I've trained Bosch everywhere, frankly, is when I have disagreed with a behavior. He's a service animal. When I disagreed with a behavior, it doesn't require me doing much of anything except maybe looking down at him or not responding to his entreaty to me. And then he realizes that's not appropriate. Okay. And then working with environmentally deprived dogs, that's another area where the opposite response. Environmentally deprived dogs, when you take them in different environments, then understand that the contrast of each one of those environments. Don't overwhelm the dogs. So contrast in that case, even an oppositional contrast to where they were, if they were in a deprived environment, in other words, a very one environment their entire lives, period, and you take them outside of that environment, it's overload. It is overwhelming for that dog. And so if you try to show it the rest of the world, you're just going to get a shut down dog for a long time. It doesn't trust you showing all of this because it's entirely overwhelmed. It had no idea the world was that big. There were that many things. There's weird stuff going on. There's cars. There's all this stuff. It'd be like you being plucked off of Earth and taken to, some star and planet with technology a million years ahead of us, and it's like magic, and you'd be completely overwhelmed when they show you everything and you have no idea what's going on. That's how overwhelming it is. Okay. So every environment, everything you do around that dog is an opposite of what it's experienced. So be careful on how you work with those types of dogs. Okay. Don't overwhelm them. Give them, I go back to Barney as a prime example of what I did with Barney. Very dangerous dog, bait dog, shot 3 times, left in a ditch to die. And then they got him back to health, 110-pound Weimaraner, dangerous dog. And so I met with them 6 weeks in a row at the same very open, not used location in a massive park that you could see for 1,000 yards in every direction, and there's no activity. That's what I wanted, so that he could learn to trust me and that environment, and then trust himself. And that's the order it always goes in. Have to trust you first, guys. That's the most important thing for that dog, because you are the closest thing to it. Therefore, you're the biggest potential threat. But you're also the biggest potential for them. How you present yourself, what you present, the timing of it, the clarity of it, that's what matters. So So 6 times before I ever took him to another place, he was ready at that 6th time to see another place. And I didn't contrast it. What I did was I gave him, it was high contrast because we went from a completely open, non-used environment, although we did have, little baseball games there that we'd go up into the stands. So he got to experience other people and things like that. I carefully went to expose him to all those things and gained his total trust. So when I went to a shopping center that had a little stream in the middle of it, I knew he loved water. So basically, I had him focus on the water, playing in that stream and that water as cars are going by either side, which he was terrified of. He ignored all the dogs because I got him to focus on this environment here. And so he learned from that he could trust even that type of very well used environment. So then from then on, other than one time I took him to Lake Arlington and a plastic sail whipped around and scared the crap out of him. We didn't go back there. Every other environment I ever put him in, he trusted because he trusted me. He learned that he could trust the environments. But we always met first at our starting place, always, to base it and say, to show him, look, wherever we go, this is your behavior. This is how I'm going to be. You can trust this situation. You can trust me. So that's the way it works with environmentally deprived dogs too. Okay. So the value of presenting opposite examples to the dog and to the client. Let's talk about that. So first of all, you're allowing for learning to happen by example. Associative learning. And that's how dogs mainly learn. They observe, they see, they watch, they see somebody else do something, and they learn by it. So when you give an opposite response, the dog learns that, one, you survived, so they can do that too. So if a dog is always reactive at some situation and you go, yeah, I'm interested in that. Let's go sniff this over here. Then the dog learns, oh, okay, we survived and he did something different and I trust him, so there. And so providing an opposite response of what they normally do and expect, to give an example in those types of situations, allows for learning to happen through associative learning, understanding that they learn by example. And when you become trustworthy, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, when you become trustworthy, then they look to you for examples, and you can't break that trust. That's the main thing. Okay. Because if you break that trust, if you go overboard, if you expect the dog to understand everything when you get one little minor thing learned, you're going to lose the dog. So allowing comparisons to be understood. So sometimes you give an example, you give the opposite, and you show how you can use both of those, both to the client and to the dog. So see if I can think of an example. You respond a certain way to a particular situation, and then the next time you respond the opposite way. So you're teaching the dog what you can do both of these things. Now you've got an A-B scenario or comparison for them. So you're helping them get the A-B comparison if it's not obvious to them of having A-B comparison. In other words, the contrast between the two answers is obvious, right? If a subtle contrast between this one and this one, if that dog is at a mental point where it doesn't trust people, it doesn't know people, doesn't care, Jack Russell, whatever, and they're not seeing A-B comparisons on a linear thing towards C, that now they've got a direction. Remember, 1, 2, 3 creates pattern. So if they're not at a position to understand patterning, then you have to give opposite responses to show them you towards something else to say, okay, now you've got two comparisons of what happens. Now let's try this one again so that you understand this is one I prefer to go. So if I bark at a dog that it's barking at, and then I don't respond to a dog, and that dog kind of goes, whatever. And then we use that again, and we use that again. So doing an opposite response initially for a dog that doesn't have any answers, other answers, isn't a bad thing, but you're guiding them to the opposite. So they see the opposite results. Okay. I know I'm kind of blasting through these things. Each one of these things could probably be a class in itself. So, but I want you to understand how contrast and clarity is basis of a lot of learning, guys. And there's so many ways of using that contrast. Okay. So you're allowing those comparisons to be understood. You're teaching acceptable and unacceptable behaviors through that, both with the contrast, okay, the opposite, and them understanding the opposite, or with a dog with little experience other than one answer for everything, then you're showing them the contrast between the two polar opposites and then teaching them that that's unacceptable because we're not doing it anymore. We're not allowing it anymore. We're doing this line of thinking and behavior instead. Okay. So those with deprived environments, and a deprived environment is a dog in a backyard that barks at everything. That's a deprived environment. Doesn't matter that there's different cars going back and forth and dogs over there and everything. It only knows this one universe right here. That's a deprived environment if that's all it ever lives in. Okay. And then when is that appropriate? Well, that's what we're talking about, is when are contrasts, when is that oppositional, diametrically opposed 180-degree response appropriate? I've discussed a lot of those types of examples. So when you're not reaching a dog initially, try an opposite response and see what happens. Don't try this at home without professional help. But okay, test those waters a little bit. Keep yourself safe, obviously, especially with an aggressive dog or a fearful dog that may not know what you're not understand and lash out just because it doesn't understand. Okay. And by the way, I'll give you, it's not going to help you that much. I'll give you this outline again. I'll send it to Angela and have her forward it to you. I don't have the forwarding capabilities. She has all your emails. I don't. So, so now let's talk about, so that's contrast in oppositions. Now let's talk about contrast in shades of response. It's an entirely different subject matter. Contrast, for instance, of a dog, wanting to influence me and I'm not influenced. I'm calm, composed, and just kind of looking off like, go away, kid, you bother me, or, I don't see you as a threat or whatever else. I use the composure aspect and the disinterest an awful lot because humans are very emotional about all their responses to dogs. And so when I give them no emotion, they've got nowhere to go with it. So then they have to stop, think, and then we can do something together because now we're having a conversation instead of just a response. Okay. So now let's talk about contrast in shades of response. So this allows for the dog to get closer to the answer or response because you're giving a shade of response. So you're in a composed state and you give a little blip of yes. I go back to every class I teach, I try to remind people you are not looking for perfection. You're looking for the direction. And if you get that increment better in the direction that you're trying to help that dog to, or that client, you need to let them know That's what you're looking for, because these stacked on top of each other, what do? This. In slow, out fast. Because why? Because they begin to trust this, and they're pushing those little steps much higher as they go, because they understand it, they trust it, they see the direction, and it helps them learn. Okay. So that's what these shades, this little bit of this little signal going, yep, good, nope, that's the wrong direction. Okay. All it takes is a yes, no type thing. You could call it, I call those responses, it's not reward and punishment. I guess it could be classified scientifically that way, but in human brains, words have meanings. So what I say is agreement or disagreement. And to what level do you agree or disagree? And if you're calm, composed, and therefore a tiny little blip in that straight line is very noticeable by the dog now, instead of how you normally are as a human, emotionally like this all the time. And how's that dog supposed to pick out the contrast? Ever. It can't. That's the problem. So, again, allowing for the dog to get closer to the answer or response or behavior you're trying to communicate, you're agreeing with or disagreeing with mildly. So, with a calm, composed, non-affected, when you give a response of any type, all it needs to be is that much, and that dog's going to notice it and understand it. Okay, so now you have an almost effortless communication of clarity with that dog, and it's paying attention to you because it gets to. Okay, it informs the dog about the current tests that it gives. Is this right? Because dogs are testing all the time, especially huskies, right? How about now? How about over here? Hey, so their current testing, that shade of response rather than an opposite, don't do that. That little, no, then it goes, pause, it thinks, it goes, okay, let me test this. Nope, test this. Okay, yep, good girl, pat, pat. That right there gives the dog the direction and gives the ability for it to be part of that partnership that you're trying to create. That's what relationship-based training is all about, the partnership. Okay. So, so it gives you the path, it gives the dog the pathway.
Yeah, hit it.
Whoop, somebody's, okay. It gives the dog the pathway, which allows it to have buy-in, because it's the one discovering it. You're not teaching it. You're not demanding things of it. You're not getting compliance. You're getting cooperation. Because, okay, so these studies that say, it takes 100 times of repeating for, you to learn anything unless you're having fun. Okay, but they didn't put the other part in, is if you're the one wanting to learn and you get, quote unquote, rewarded for it, let's take fun out of it. Let's take survival is the reason for everything. And now let's say, okay, so I get rewarded or agreed to for that direction and disagreed slightly for that direction. Now I know which direction to go. Okay, I'm the one giving the responses and the answers, meaning the dog. So it's my thoughts, meaning the dog, doing this. So you have instant buy-in. It takes 3 repetitions. That's all, guys. That's why relationship-based training, this basis works so well. Okay. And you guys that went through 4 recently, Rachel, Robin, you were there, weren't you? Yeah. What did you guys learn? I don't know who else was there on here. I can't see everybody, so I apologize. What did you guys learn on that, which is capturing the behaviors and agreeing or disagreeing slightly? So Rachel, Robin, either one of you guys, both of you, I don't care. Open your mics. Hello. There you
Hello.
go.
I'm just thinking back. Um, I don't remember. I mean, I know the dog that I had to work with. I mean,
You had the
he,
most difficult dog, absolutely.
yes, I had.
But he learned, didn't he?
But he did learn, and I think the consistency also in the clarity was important for him. That, like, he was a barking dog in class and was always up, and he had a hard time to settle. So I limited the space where I allowed him to walk back and forth. So, but on the second day already, he realized somehow, okay, it's not going to further. So it's the consistency also in this clarity that you give to the dog.
Yeah.
I think.
And your responses weren't over the top, were they?
No,
You
I
weren't
don't think.
you weren't trying to control him, you were trying to guide him.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's a huge difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And don't lose the
and
patience.
yeah, you can't, yeah, that's the composure aspect. So you must remain composed. The dog doesn't influence your composure, and you did an excellent job at that.
Thank you.
There's a lot of people that never would have made it through that class with that dog, trust me. So pat yourself on the back, because I can't. You're too far away. You're some miles away.
Yeah,
But
thank
truly, you did a great job with that dog. I yeah, that was great. Anyway,
you. Yeah,
very
it was.
cool. Robin, what did you take out of it? What about repetitions and all of that stuff?
Yeah, so Zoe was can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Yeah, Zoe was basically in charge of the household. She didn't have any direction really. She just kind of did her own thing, and was kind of a dog that was like go go go. And humans were basically irrelevant. And so, behavior capturing with her was really on the cellular level. Like I had to just look for tiny points in time where she would pay attention to me, and of course worked very hard to create those situations without putting pressure on her. A lot of a lot of inviting her, invitations to join me, and whatever invitations worked, and I would go with those. And again, like you said, repetition, repeat those patterns, so that in other situations where maybe she really wouldn't have like turned in to check in with me, she started to. For me, that was really magical because she was a nice dog, but she could care less whether you were attached to the leash or not. And by the end of those 4 or 5 days, she was turning and checking in with me on a 20-foot lead, which I never thought she would do in years, and just following a tiny hand gesture. Hey, would you come this way with me? And yeah, I mean, I use it every day. I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
it's
These
most
were all German Shepherds that we borrowed, by the way, guys.
yeah, and she, I mean, I just saw something come alive in her that I'm certain her owners probably never saw.
Right.
And by the way, I never heard from them. I was kind of sad about that after I gave them my number and 6 sheets of notes. But what can you do? They were all excited and oh yeah, we're gonna call you, and they never did. But yeah, I mean, I think that's when a client sees that moment and sees that work, that's when you really start to get more invested in
Yeah.
this predator that they have living with them. And
So it changed the whole mind and behavior of that dog towards humans, not just you, and
Right.
towards the group in general. As a, I mean, we had what, 9 people and 9 dogs there.
Yeah. And she didn't really care about the other dogs either until
Yeah.
those last couple of days. And then
Yeah.
she started wanting to be part of the group for different reasons than wanting to be first to catch all the rabbits before everybody else. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's amazing, but it's so, it's just a micro seconds and moments that you have to capture. And that's, you just have to be patient
You
and
have to be
aware,
present. You have to be present
Yeah, exactly.
with the dog. And the repetitions are not, it's not drilling, it's not drilling anything.
No,
We did very little quote unquote training, didn't we?
almost none.
Yeah. So how do you train a dog?
Yeah.
Because that's what course 4 is about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, you got
Yeah.
everybody confused now.
Yeah. Well, obedience is momentary and boring to me. It's momentary in a dog's mind. So how do you get to the point where you can get
capture
composure?
everything. You can
You
capture
capture and
everything.
if you get,
And
I
that's
always tell my clients, if I have a composed dog, I don't care what they're doing.
Yeah.
I don't care if they sit or lay down or do, all those things. If they're just composed, what more can you ask for?
So what I always say is, as I've always said for years, I'd rather reach a dog than teach a dog, because if I can reach that dog, it'll do anything I ask of it.
Yeah.
And it already does all the things we want them to do. It sits, it lays down, it walks beside you, it does X, Y, and Z. We have a whole list of all the things dogs do or that we can ask them to do. So, yeah. And, what did we do in teaching sit and back up? We did it 3 times, didn't we? That was about it. And they got it.
Yep.
Doesn't take that long, guys.
Mm-mm.
So, and that was about contrast and clarity and shades of clarity. That's what we're talking about here. Okay. That shade of contrast.
Yeah, I wanted to add that because my dog Evans, he was not paying attention to me at all in the beginning. He was completely in his own mind and pulling like a tractor. I've never had a dog pulling like this crazy for several
Yeah,
days.
even a husky. Yeah, I know.
Even he was really so. What I wanted him to, I needed to put more effort in my hand signals and also my voice. I was more talking with him than I usually do with dogs, but like, you are too far, come by, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I was really like putting everything to make him clear, I'm here and I want to communicate with you. And then after 2 days, I was really like, I'm going to, because I had him on a martingale. And then I was close to say, okay, I'm going to a prong. But then he turned around and I didn't need the prong. So, but
No.
just saying sometimes clarity, depending on the dog, it means you need to increase your signals than you usually do. And
Sure.
then
You got to
by
reach
the
that
time
dog.
you can, yes. And
You
it
have to
takes,
reach the dog.
depending on what state of mind this dog has, you need more and clear signals than maybe with others who are already paying to yourself. Then you can just smooth movement of your hand or something like that. So, but with
Yes.
him, it's
Yeah.
really like every
So-
step I did was like very planned. Yeah.
Right. So we're talking about contrast and in is clarity, and that's the way I always say it, but it assists and allows for clarity. Contrast in itself, without the context with the dog in that situation and how the dog responds, doesn't mean anything. So you have to know what, where, and when, obviously. So, okay, thanks, Rachel. All right, so it informs the dog about its current testing and the pathway it's taking. These are the shades of responses, right? Provides trusted communication, corroborating the direction for problem solving or avoidances. So it isn't always about doing X, it's also about avoiding situations, helping the dog to understand we can avoid this, no big deal, it's not a threat. We can avoid those cows next door, that sort of thing. Shaded contrast modifies responses within the natural makeup of the dog. In other words, the dog gets to choose, and that tells you a lot about that dog about how it responds to those minor shades of yes, no, and directionality. So that contrast, again, contrast with this is this, which is why people yell and flail around and do monkey things, right? Because they're so emotional and frittered and, off in Never Never Land all the time in their own heads. But if you present yourself as a composed partner that you're trustworthy, that minor difference, that dog's picking up on it. So within that, that's how dogs understand each other, is their minor, I'm talking about tiny little inflections like the piloerection we're going to talk about in a couple of months. Those minor differences, even one hair, that every dog knows what that means to that dog and what the situation is, whether they look outward or inward to that dog. So it allows those shaded contrasts, allows the dog to absorb it within themselves, understanding it from their standpoint. That's very important, guys. Opposite responses than encountered before cause a reevaluation of tactical and strategic understanding. If you listened last time or were on last time in November about tactical and strategic and what those things mean and how it relates to dog training. Okay. Dog has has instant buy-in, realizing you're responding to its behaviors and you to the dog's. That's so important because now you become just partners that it's like you're both on the same wavelength. And that's what you're trying to get. That's what your clients want. They don't know it, but that's what you want to give them. Okay. So that when they see you responding to their behaviors by yes, no, they also see that that you respond to theirs, they respond to yours. So the minor inflections of just turning a head and they look over here and join you because you're trusted, because you are communicating all the time, whether you know it or not. Okay. Now let's talk about contrast from an expected baseline. Okay, so we had contrast in opposition, we had contrast in shades of response, so minor or sectional responses versus opposites or high-end contrasts. So from an expected baseline, and this is where I've been talking about, if your baseline is like this, it's difficult for a dog to pick out any one thing in that grouping, okay? And if your response and your behavior to the dog or for some aspect, a lot of trainers use that as a game, I'll put it that way, for the dog to teach them by repetitive action over and over and over and over and over again to listen for a sound or a signal or something else, for that dog to go, okay, I can pick that out of there because I've done it 3,000 times now. Instead of dog picks out one little tiny blip from you the first time, the second time, third time. Now it goes, I get it. That's why that training works so well and so quick. It takes 3 times. They have the pattern. They understand it because there's a contrast. And so they understand it. They see the results. Okay. And I'm not blowing smoke up your skirt, guys. Okay. It really happens that way. That's the way the brains work. Okay. So composure could be the baseline. If your baseline is emotion and chaos, God help the dogs. Okay. Anytime you allow a human emotion, by human emotion, I mean emotions that dogs don't have, that they don't understand. And trust me, they don't. Okay. Oops, somebody got unmuted. There we go. So calmness, so composure begets calmness and total self-control. Okay. You say, well, that's impossible. Well, no, it's not. And I present myself in my classes as the example of composure. What does it mean? And then there's contrast. If I can do it, anybody can do it. Okay. So it allows for the dog to pick up even the slightest changes in your behavior. That slight difference in angle of, if you present yourself, if you're composed and you can control yourself, your body, your physical, your physiological, all of those things, and you do a slight angle change in your head where you look and your shoulders, a dog's going to look that way, even turn that way if you're walking together, for instance. Okay. And that's really what you want, is that partner that you're like this. You know, I in course 1, I give the example of Pasha, and I don't even remember the name of that other dog, but the 2 dogs sitting there in my backyard looking like this, exactly the same way, at the same time, looking at squirrel, there's trees, there's some noise over here. That's what you want, is that just natural partnership, the brains together. That's what you're looking for it's kind of perfection, if you will. Okay. Allows the dog to pick up even the slightest change in your behavior, how you carry yourself, your speed difference. Because if you're constantly just like this, the only speed difference is for you to slow down, and then they're wondering what's wrong. So if you can be calm, composed, smoothness is relaxation actually begets speed. Because when you're tense, you have to relax first before you can even move, guys. Right? So your voice, what timbre it is, if it stays down low and calm and all this stuff, low for you. We talked about that before in another CHRI Live talk about your baseline of wherever your voice is. If you're a female with a high-pitched voice, that's your baseline. Dogs understand that when they hear you talk and you go inflection up. So it's not that you have to be at my pitch level and go, hey, I'm Nelson. You can be high-pitched, just don't go up from there. That's your baseline, and dogs understand that. I've observed it for thousands of dogs, thousands of times. Okay, so the hands, the smoothness, the jerkiness, the speed of a hand signal, the use of the leash, all of those things, when you're composed, it all becomes smooth and very trustworthy and very understandable. Okay, legs, how you move your legs, your feet, all of those things, every aspect of you. If you're calm and composed, it exudes out of you. Why are you calm and composed? Because you've got this. You see the environment you're in, you're aware of it, and you go, nothing's wrong. I got this, buddy. And the dog goes, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm finally on page 2 now. We're an hour and a quarter in to an hour and a quarter talk. So I'll try to blast through this. Again, that provides a trustworthy partner the dog can count on having it, survival partner, and assistance from you as you are capable. Most dogs don't trust humans in being capable. That's why they continue being reactive at other dogs or other things, is because they don't trust the human to be able to handle it, because they do monkey things trying to stop the dog. So there is no communication there. Well, there is a communication. You can't trust me, dog, because I'm out of control. And I'm yanking on you, agitating you, pulling you back. Saying, I'm afraid, let's leave and run away from that bad thing over there. Instead of going, yeah, I don't care. I got this. Let's go. Let's do this instead. Let's do something enjoyable instead. That's how it should go. Contrast in environmental usage and understanding. Okay, so I was talking about using environment for Barney, for a fearful or aggressive dog or anything else is contrast in the environment itself. Don't overwhelm that dog, but if a dog can handle it, give them contrasts. Show them, okay, we're in this situation, we're over here, we're doing this. I want you to behave the same. I want to remind you, my expectations of you are the same here as doing those other things in a different location. That helps your clients more than you would know just by teaching the dog, hey, here are the rules, here's what the rules are, where it is, all that stuff. This is how we behave regardless. And the dog goes, ah, I got it. Okay. Use of tools. So when you introduce a new environment, a new behavior of yourself, a new request, and especially a different tool, each one of those is a major variable. It's a difference of how you communicate to the dog. So it's like teaching them Spanish all of a sudden when they just learned English. So using an exact baseline U to introduce a new major variable. In other words, it's the same thing regardless of what tool I use on you. This is what I expect of you. Now, tools can indicate, just like a harness does or a vest for a dog, like when I used to do search and rescue with Mia, or cadaver recovery or explosive detection. We used 3 different harnesses for that. And she knew which one I put on her. That's what was her job at that moment. And we'd go do whatever we needed to do. So, but before you change that baseline behavior, you have to be clear. Here's this tool. Here's what I mean here now. And so a lot of sport guys get that thing on the dog, and get it going. They behave differently. So the dog kind of goes overcharged with that contrast immediately. And I will repeat, I cannot tell you how many overtrained, overstimulated Malinois as demo dogs that I've had to deprogram at the request of the trainers, their own dog, over the years, because they were overstimulated, and that's what the dog thinks its life is, and that's what the human wants of it, and that's all it is. They can't live with the dog. Now, trainers that understand how to do that, I mean, we're talking about, Bart and those guys, they understand how to reach that dog in the first place. So they don't have those problems because they've got, 40, 50 years of experience in it, and they're tops in what they're doing. And that's not the guys I'm talking about. Okay. Now, so second category, not just about, first category is really about what is contrast and how do we use that with a dog or a client. So this one is about yourself. So your calm composer presentation so that even a slight change is clear to the dog. That's important. Okay. The dog becomes a trusting partner in you. You become trustworthy. It's not about the dog being trustworthy that you can work with. It's about you becoming trustworthy to show the dog, hey, you can trust me, you can follow me. Okay. Dog does not have to follow you. They're in tune with you and notice even slight changes because you matter. Why do you matter? Not because they like you, love you, they want to lick you, all that stuff. Survival is number one always. What's the answer to survival? Well, if I've got a partner I can trust, I feel better at any situation and I feel I can survive better. Okay. That's why we are social animals and so are dogs. Okay. Survival, safety, clear communication, trustworthiness, all of that. If you don't have clear communication with somebody else, you can't trust them, period. I challenge anybody to tell me otherwise, to prove that otherwise. Okay. It's easiest to communicate from a natural baseline: voice, hand signals, tool usage, directives, commands, cooperations, all of that stuff. So if your baseline is here versus already at the top, now you've got everything to show in between. I've got a lot of variations that I can use. Believe it or not, having that composed baseline enhances your timing, because you see instant results with that dog and the dog responds to you in kind. If you're composed in your mind, now you can actually see what's going on around you. The environment includes the dog, it includes the client. And so you can observe all these things instantly. Those of you guys that have been on, excuse me, course 1 RBBM online, and we review everybody's exercises on video, and I stop it, at microseconds and say, look, that eighth of a second you had to respond to the dog, and you lost the dog because you didn't see it within that eighth second, or even 5 seconds later, right? So that's what I mean is when you're aware, when you're composed, you're aware of the environment, you're confident, calm, composed, you get those signals from them. So your timing gets better. Just does, guys. You don't allow emotions to control you. That's the composure. You don't allow the dog's behavior to control or affect your emotions either. Fear, uncertainty, doubt, frustration, anger, all of those things are just in your head. Don't allow them to happen. And look for that increment. Look for a win 100 times more than you look for a loss. And you'll start seeing all those little wins and all those little yeses. And all those little yeses add up to the biggest yes ever. Okay. Especially with dogs that I worked with, which, they would die if I didn't get yes. So you don't allow the dog's behavior to control or affect your emotions. And we got calm composure, and now we got contrast clarity effect on the dog. So effect on you, now the contrast on the dog becomes calm composed. Why? Because it trusts you and it sees you're calm and composed. Now that trust, I got a partner to exist with now. Those feral animals, it's the first time they've ever had a partner other than a dog that they're both scared to death of everything else, that I affect them by being composed, but understand them. I look at the same things. I look at those cars going by on that street just like they do at the same time. They see that. They don't look at me. They understand inherently we're together. We think alike. I can trust this guy. And so my calm relaxation, if I sit there for 10 minutes with them and just look at the cars going on the street, that's the most important 10 minutes of their life at that point. Okay. Communications are clearer when you're calm. They are influenced by your composure in all situations. You've got this. Emotions are understandable, and dire situations become less and less imagined by the dog when you are composed. So there's no reason, if they begin trusting you, and you observe and you respond and you say, yeah, I see it, doesn't bother me. So the less dire situations that they see in their mind, that they imagine, the worst is going to happen, I got to kill this animal, or, they're going to kill me type thing, or I got to run away because I'm going to die. And the more they are influenced by your composure, the less that happens, and their response goes way down, and even the most severe cases can live then in normal situations. The trust in you and handler happens because of contrast and clarity. Dogs follow trusted leadership. You have to be understood to become trusted. You must be trusted to become a leader. You must remain composed and have the appropriate responses to stay a leader. Use that aspect to guide the dog to better behaviors. It's you that provides the baseline, not just for yourself, but for the dog. What do we do? How do we do it, etc. Let's do these things together. It's not about you demanding in some deprived environment inside some empty building that you proof behaviors in an empty building. Basically, you're just proofing training of what you did with that dog in that building. Go out there, do things with the dog. Environmental agility, nose work, roll on the ground and play with it. Whatever it is, that's your partner. Okay. Effect on your mentality and physiological presence. It reshapes your brain patterning, guys. When you create your composed self, it reshapes your brain to become that for yourself, but for others too. You get what you focus on. Literally, that's how the brain structures itself. There's less of reliance on outbursts, yourself and the dogs. Lack of frustration to influence you, presents you as trustworthy, creates a helpful and understandable partner in training and behavior assistance. So you're the partner, and if you're out of control, what's the dog going to be? Provide yourself with your own baseline and clarity from which to operate in all cases. So provide yourself with that clarity, that opposite that humans want to be emotional, and we are emotional. If we're calm and composed, that contrast then provides your own base from which you operate, instead of through emotional business, everything else that weighs down on humans. When you're with that dog, you're with that dog. That's it. Nothing else exists. Boom, done. Okay. So I won't have time to ask you questions this time. Next week, Wednesday night, which is the scheduled January thing, I'll ask you guys some questions. By the way, next week, January 17th, it's 7 o'clock Central, not 6 o'clock for next week. And that is The Devil is in the Details. And the reason I do particular subjects in particular order is to go over some of these little details that I go in the previous ones. So the devil's in the detail, and we're going to go deep dive in some other areas with that. So with that, I hope that was contrasting and clear for you guys. And I do hope it helps you in some way. That's the whole purpose of this effort for these live talks, so that I can go deep dive in some subject matter that is very narrow, but I feel helps you guys to understand and make yourselves more available to your clients to help them and their dogs. So, and your own dogs, frankly. So, okay. So with that, wow, almost an hour and a half. So we'll end it there. And I say this, and I mean it inherently. I'm honored by every one of you guys wanting to learn and be on here and listen to me, my monkey chatter and rambling. I hope it helps, because that's what it's for. So thank you guys. All right, we'll see you next week, I hope.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Nelson. Thank you.
Adios.